Recording in progress.
Ban tổ chức xin kính mời các anh chị ngồi ở hàng ghế sau, có thể dịch lên phía trước một chút ạ. Chiều nay cái phiên hội thảo cũng sẽ có một số các đại biểu cũng sẽ vắng mặt, nên là cũng mời các anh chị ngồi lên trên. Mặc dù đấy, nhưng mà chiều nay thì cái nội dung là hết sức là quan trọng vì nó liên quan đến các cái góp ý sâu, làm nào nó thuận tiện hơn, thì rất là mong các anh chị ngồi lên trên ạ. Em ơi, em ngồi lên trên đi. Anh ơi. Đấy.
Xin phép quý vị để chương trình buổi chiều được phép bắt đầu. Lời đầu tiên cho phép tôi thay mặt ban tổ chức xin được cảm ơn sự tham gia nhiệt tình của các quý vị đại biểu trong phiên thảo luận buổi sáng ngày hôm nay. Kính thưa quý vị, để bắt đầu cho phiên buổi chiều dưới hình thức bàn tròn chuyên gia đóng góp ý kiến trực tiếp cho danh mục phân loại xanh và dự thảo quyết định của Thủ tướng Chính phủ về việc ban hành tiêu chí môi trường và xác nhận đối với dự án được cấp tín dụng xanh và phát hành trái phiếu xanh. Xin kính mời tiến sĩ Mai Thế Toản, Phó Viện trưởng Viện Chiến lược Chính sách Tài nguyên Môi trường có đôi lời phát biểu về những yêu cầu đối với nội dung phiên thảo luận buổi chiều ngày hôm nay. Tiếp theo đó, xin kính mời ông tiếp tục chủ trì các phiên thảo luận của buổi chiều.
Cảm ơn anh Bình. Theo cái tinh thần thì chiều nay chúng ta sẽ tiếp tục trao đổi thảo luận về một số nội dung mà đã dự kiến và là lên kế hoạch rồi.
Have discussion on a number of points as mentioned this morning, and the experts in the drafting team will discuss the content of environmental criteria. Is the green taxonomy full and complete, and the green classification of projects, and also the validation procedure. We want to collect your opinions on all of these contents for the completion of the green taxonomy. And first on the agenda, we would like to invite. There is a presentation by Dr. Lại Văn Mạnh, a brief presentation on the methodology to identify criteria for the green taxonomy and criteria to identify projects that are able to be financed through green bonds and green credits. Thank you very much, Dr. Mai Thế Thoại, for your introduction. On behalf of the drafting team, I'd like to have a brief presentation on the key points to explain the methodology for identification. In the morning, we have presentations. Many speakers mentioned the needs for the green taxonomy, and we are very open to all of your opinions, as many as possible, so we can systemize the data and collect more inputs for the draft in the coming time. And these are the key points of my presentation. The needs. I will not repeat this section as I've already presented this morning. The objectives, I will also skip this part. And the objectives and principles, as we have listened to this morning, the most important point in the Environmental Law 2020, Article 149 and 150 contain a list of projects that deliver environmental benefits, but these lists have overlapping in some categories. So, as discussed with MOF and the State Bank, issuing a unified green taxonomy is very important. This is not a combination of two lists into one catalog, but a unified green taxonomy for a universal application. This is the key consideration in the developing green taxonomy, and we have some big questions during the process. As Ms. Dr. Thoại mentioned in the morning, what are the criteria that should be used, and what are the biggest economic actors who contribute to these activities, and which of these activities from those industries will help us to achieve the objectives. We raised these questions for consideration, but these are only initial consideration from the perspective of the drafting team. So I expect that you give us more questions. The users or the objectives. The objects of application, they are businesses, organizations, and individuals who need or want to use green bonds. The approach in the green growth strategy national strategy, there is a classification of sustainable development. What are the differentiation between green growth criteria and environmental protection environmental criteria? This is one part of the green growth strategy. So there is supposed to be social goals as well. But this is only about environmental objectives and climate change response goals. This is developed by my team and also considered by GIZ experts. We're looking for an approach to combine the requirements of Article number 149 and 150. In the first column, there are 7 types of projects that deliver environmental benefits. In Article number 150, in the next column, and they have been used by European countries in developing their taxonomy. We analyzed all the components and terminologies in the environmental criteria, and we want to group them into 10 groups to create a harmony between Article 149 and 150. So that is the way we want to do it, and we want to receive your feedback on this approach. These are the environmental objectives that are prioritized, and I will not repeat this as it is presented this morning. Dr. Nam also presented this content in the green taxonomy draft that we sent you. There are 8 types of projects. There will be the name of the project, the statistic code, the screening criteria, the requirements of deliver no harm to the environment. And we have 2 rounds. Each round contains up to 30 experts in order to improve this draft. The experts from World Bank also challenge the draft through these rounds. This section was presented by Dr. Nam already. The structure of the green taxonomy from China's approach. So for your references, and Dr. Nam also presented it to you this morning. This is the taxonomy of Vietnam and the structure presented by Dr. Nam. All of the information we have here are the results after many rounds of feedbacks, but we remain open and we expect to have the most effective and relevant and applicable green taxonomy as required by the government's office. And it should be simple and easy to understand to the general public as well. So in that principle, please provide us with your feedbacks to have a better version of the green taxonomy in the coming time. And we expect that we want to have a fruitful round table discussion. Thank you very much, Dr. Lại Văn Mạnh.
Thank you, Dr. Mike. So this morning we have listened to all the presentation, and this afternoon there remains a presentation of Mr. Mike that you have just listened. As a matter of fact, that we have we were over time according to schedule, so we will readjust schedule this afternoon a little bit. Organizing committee would like to kindly request all the online and offline participants to comment on let's say for about 15 or 20 minutes for this commentary for your comments before we enter into question and answer session. You can raise your hands before you want to voice your views. On the screen we also have the function, the button for you to press if you want to raise your hands. floor is for all of you. My name is Jung, the Director of the International Cooperation Department. I'm the person who directly involved in the drafting the sustainable financing program of ASEAN. I would like to give some comments seen from the perspective of a person who participated in drafting this and also as a user, future users of this tool. I'm as a direct participant, so I agree with what you have presented. I listened to the presentation of the financial investors both in the Asian region and in the world. Firstly, if there are too many green taxonomies resulting in too many set of criteria and standards, and that makes it difficult for businesses on the market to gain access to that, especially for financial investors when given the enormous investment fund they would encounter with a lot of various criteria resulting in cost elements of the investors when they access to different types of taxonomy. They have to consult with, they have to get a second opinion from a third party, from the verifier or assurers. And here there's some services not available in Vietnam, services including consultancy service and the service to critique the framework of green credit, green bond, not to mention about the auditing services. In Vietnam, here and there, you can find such services available. However, they are not reliable. The big four auditing companies expressed their willingness to offer this kind of services. It's possible for them to come up with some solution to help out the implementation of the green taxonomy utilizing the domestic services. There will be some requirement for the organization in the region to set up the agency in Vietnam in order to provide such services. We are not pessimistic about unavailability of the services. Vietnam can offer that, but actually we have some options. But most importantly, the information is very important for making these services viable. Without information, no one could evaluate that, and different parties, as Mr. Toàn said, that they do assessment based on the scenes from a technical perspective. Because before making investment, the financial investor rely completely on the technical side. So the people who critique the framework profile before issuance. Hopefully, in the scope of their function and responsibility, we can make it possible for such organization to be established in the future. The second part regarding the taxonomy, ASEAN has 10 countries that are able to implement that, but ASEAN Plus means at a higher level. The Foundation, we have decision 3, and the decision will let investors put it at the discretion of investors to identify with the issuer whether the green issuance or amber issuance. That's closely related to the green taxonomy that Vietnam is pursuing. The reason is the foundation applicable to 10 different countries with a different level of economic development and the scale of issuance. The scale of issuance differs from different businesses, both domestic and foreign invested companies. We are talking here so as non-financial businesses. Once issued bond, the money can be flown directly into green project. So the part we must know that the number of businesses in the market are so enormous number of businesses. The third part is mutual recognition. Once we have the green taxonomy available, do we recognize foreign companies to utilize the Vietnamese version or EU? They have their own set of green taxonomy. Will we recognize their taxonomy? If we recognize that, are we in harmony with the CUI of EU? If we harmonize with them, that's no longer necessary for us to develop our own set of taxonomy. There are two reasons we need to look in. First of all, CMI and EU standards, most recently version 2 of ASEAN will be available soon on the 31st of December. They will hold a meeting to approve version 2. The most important point is to orient the amber businesses, not the green businesses. If based on the definition, it would be very difficult for Vietnam to utilize that. The developing country, first of all, they have to rely on the natural resources to grow. They have no other financial sources. That's the first reason. In order to position ourselves, if once we recognize other taxonomy, people would claim that why don't you copy that and paste? That's all. And the second one that's suitable with the investment appetite of investors. And behind the Vietnamese one and EU, there's behind that there's a enormous set of specification. We just look at the surface of taxonomy without looking at the back. So that must suit the appetite as a test of the issuer and the investor. So we have to position ourselves. If we recognize EU CPI or Chinese, we need to be aware of that. Second one, all the taxonomy in the world are not fixed, but they're subject to change with every constantly with every passing day. It may the standard and threshold are subject to change and maybe higher. Maybe the technical team is suitable for discussing something about the threshold, not the financial expert, to ensure the transparency and reliability. The second point comments on the in the drafting of Prime Minister's decision. We touch upon one point. We need to mobilize finance from the private sector, but here let's say only mobilizing finance from the enterprises. People may understand that's only state-owned enterprises, not private enterprises, as Mr. Tuan mentioned that completely the private sector can take part in, because as presented by Mr. Dominic in the last session, out of the three parts, Mr. Dominic just take part in the national size, national level project or big project without mentioning, without touching upon the individual households businesses. But it's very difficult to identify the households, big households participating into such kind of project. Only big enterprises are eligible to have sufficient those documents in order to enjoy the policies incentive. That is mobilization of the resources from the private sector. some people recommend us to consider to use micro financial methodology, in which one side would mobilize resources from small enterprises according to the methodology of the micro finance. There's one lender and on-lending party. So as a function, the state bank advisable for you to look into that possibility to take a loan and on lending. And other countries, in reality, they do use that method. They use the green loan and then in turn lend to others, smaller borrowers. And EVN also like that measures for investing into EVN. The third point, we are talking about the green taxonomy, only limited to green. In between 50% green and the other 50% is not green. So for the bonds in the coming time, we aiming at a convertible bond to invest into new technology in order to replace the old technologies. Who are these enterprises? Normally the size of issuance for the companies that want to switch into green is somehow safer than making it completely green. Completely green, the investor would not invest into that because the benefit gains are not as high as switching from amber or yellow into green. So that is something to help us orient the direction to go. After this taxonomy, different line ministries will have to establish their set of standard. For MOF, also have to set a standard of green finance. Here are some table of annexes with some standards and regulation for you to consider. As a result, we need to have some certain operation to develop the criteria on the green taxonomy, resulting in the standards for the suppliers, applicable for suppliers. The fourth point here is when we share our opinion, the format to develop the Vietnamese green taxonomy, we can follow the format, general format or ASEAN format. So as when the investors look into that, they realize immediately no need to explain. ASEAN says so and the other countries say so. They just look into the format, they can realize it. Save time and money for the investors and the enterprises, make it easier for us to integrate into the community easily. And as for the instruction, the guidance, we really wish that the drafting team also prepare the guiding document to help us with this taxonomy. After development of this taxonomy, we need to have guiding documents at the time that would create a lot of problems that may be related to issues in which line ministries do not gain a good insight of what they are wanting. That would be very difficult for them to get the standards and also that help out businesses to read and understand that. Therefore, if our companies are working in agriculture, if that is very long list, you can read without understanding that. So, if we follow the ASEAN approach or European approach, our committee would be very willing to coordinate with you to have complete this vast information in the ASEAN taxonomy. When we discussed, to be honest, the countries' interest differs from different countries. As a result, approach they take in order to develop that would be different. When we prepare the policy, post-taxonomy policy, in order to position yourself when your ministries and your sectors take part in the implementation, you have to make sure that there's no flaws and gaps, and everything must be transparent and clearly defined, because that is completely new. Thirdly, such documents are not just merely documents. I highly appreciate, even though we do not include social component, but in the draft document also inclusive of some social components such as gender equality and the utilization of labor force. That is a clear evidence showing that we also take the social component into consideration, not only environmental components. In terms of terminologies, the word green is no more fashion. The terms environment and climate become more fashionable. Why? Because green is for the region only, whereas climate that covers the whole world at large. So why don't we universally agree on the definition? Green, that means climate. Otherwise, we say announcement and information according to the climate system would be different from green finance. Environmental governance would be also different. Therefore, in Mr. Dominic's discussion now, it's advisable for us to focus now on the word, the capital letter E, rather than the other three, the other two. So there's some points that relating to human rights may be difficult to discuss. So after we finish the word E, and then we move on to tackle G. Yeah, thank you very much for the comments, Mr. Zoom. In all of the comments, we take note and record everything, all of your comments. And later on, we will edit to make it more complete, and then after that we will share it back with Mr. Zoom and others so that we can agree on that. First of all, in the decision, the role of the private sector seems to be blurry. Let me clarify a little bit. Green bonds has three different categories. First one issued by the government, the second one issued by the local authority, and the third one issued by the enterprises. But for the credit, we apply exactly the terms from the law. That is investment owners who has a need of being granted with the green credit. It's not at the level of the enterprises, but also applicable for a private household, as long as you have investment portfolios or projects that belongs to green taxonomy. Here and there may be the terms we need to interpret differently in order to make comments of Mr. Zoom more clear, so that the role of the private sector is not blurry. Secondly, Mr. Zoom comment that probably you missed the point in the presentation of Mr. Nam classification of different types of projects. The first type is itself already green. The second one in the transition period. The third one is unidentified. So Vietnam, we approach the group that's by nature already green, and the second one is in transition process. For example, cement or iron, steel. If you apply a BST, the technique or the circular economy model, or you apply the technologies that utilize renewable energies or recycle, circular economy, recycling waste, etc. That is one of the criteria for consideration. Whether it's green or not, maybe the group of experts from Mr. Nam take Mr. Zoom's comments into consideration to make it clearer. And the third one, we acknowledge the comments later on the Monterey MOF and bank will take further action in order to come up with the technical guidance. Of course, that's not in the form of the legal normative documents, but in order to carry out it properly, the state-owned agency has a responsibility to guide us. Hopefully, by the end of the year, we'll have this in place. Thank you, Mr. Zoom. To continue now, I would like to invite one representative from Monterey for Ho Chi Minh City. to give a presentation relating to the need for capital for environment protection in Ho Chi Minh City, and your input to have the draft of the Prime Minister decision, please.
I'd like to invite to stage Ms. Thuy, the Director of Inspection Office of the Department of Environmental Protection. Good afternoon. Emphasized by the leader of Ho Chi Minh City, Don Ray, and the Sub-Department of Environmental Protection, I am speaking for Ho Chi Minh City, Don Ray, and I'd like to contribute some feedback for the round table discussion on the draft decision of the Prime Minister and the issuance of environmental criteria for identifying the project that can be financed by green bonds, green credit. Ho Chi Minh City has a population of more than 9 million people with high needs for extending the transportation of road and waterway and airway. This will be the better foundation for Ho Chi Minh City to develop into the center of southern economy and make the region the hub for the region and for Vietnam and for the region. However, Ho Chi Minh City is facing a number of challenges in terms of economic and population development that leads to problems in infrastructure and environment. The task of protecting environment in recent years, Ho Chi Minh City and the party of Ho Chi Minh City in the meeting of October, the action plan to reduce pollution was issued. And in recent years, Ho Chi Minh City has been implementing successfully pollution reduction program. The Ho Chi Minh City issued a decree number 19 in 2018 to reduce littering into the waterways and road systems. Decree number 16 2021 for environmental protection and solid waste management in Ho Chi Minh City was issued. Reviewing the environmental protection from 2023 to 2030 signed the cities will continue the ongoing programs and also to make use of maximize the resources of businesses and people in environmental protection. 2020 to 2030, we have 13 criteria for waste and wastewater in residential and business activities to build stations and processors of waste. These require big amounts of funding and financing for wastewater and waste management and processing projects, which is considered a milestone in the previous period. Don Ray is supporting through providing preferential funding for environmental protection projects, design manufacturing of environmental friendly material, and waste collection. The loans are mostly provided to projects of waste collection and waste processing. According to reports to Gongray, the needs for capital is more than 400 million pounds. There are 190 projects applied for financing by for loans from the foundation. 97 projects were approved and provided capital of more than $40 million. Actually, we haven't met the requirements demands for capital. People, human city. These are some figures related to the needs for capital in Ho Chi Minh, related to the draft decision and the criteria. Basically, we agree with the approach and the principle of developing the draft, especially simplifying the procedure for individuals and organizations who have a need to apply for green bonds and credits. Those are some of our feedbacks. Clause 2, Article 7. Point 3, it is applicable only for green bond users. And the projects who are qualified, who are required to do EIA but not environmental impact alone. I don't think they are mentioned in the regulation. Point B, clause 2, Article 7. If there is a project at the level that higher community level, then which governmental level will do the validation for such project. So I think we need to add in the type of projects that are required to do EIA but not environmental license, and also the validation responsibility at which level would carry out the validation for KP level project. I see three assignments for projects at the professional level only. And green taxonomy gap, I see that the taxonomy covers all types of projects for the project owners to carry out steps according to the current applicable regulation. But I see that there is like one step after the projects that are qualified for EIA but not environmental license. I think this is similar to the previous point that I mentioned. It is for the validation of green projects. So please add in the objects, the projects that are not required to have environmental license, and also the set of documents for each step. I see that there is a list of requirements such as the EIA according to environmental protection law. The clause 3, Article 7, A, B, C, D, and how many documents are there in the dossier for the monitoring and validation. Please add help. And also during the AIA the more sensitive on the time they should submit environmental assessment, environmental impact assessment. That would lead to discussion over the time that they need to submit the report. And in addition to that, Article number 5, projects that are required to EAA but not environmental license. What should be the case for them? Thank you very much. These are the feedbacks from Opportunity Dondre.
Thank you, Mr. Representative of the Dondre of Ho Chi Minh City. Thank you for your very practical inputs will be utilized in the draft of the Prime Minister decision based on what the practical experience you have done on the project, which with protection, environment protection component. To carry on, I would like to invite one representative of one commercial banks to give comments on the draft of the Prime Minister's decision. Let me formally introduce Mr. Trần Minh Hoàng, the expert of Credit of VP Bank, to give the comments on the draft Prime Minister decision. Mr. Trần Minh Hoàng, please. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Hoàng. I come from the bank in Deutsche Commercial Bank in the capacity as one of the leading banks which have good portfolio on green credit, and as well recognized in the international market with more than 20 years of experience in operating and issuance of green credit. VP Bank would like to contribute some comments directly in relation to the operation issuance of green credit of credit institution. Number one, I would like to comment on Article 7 in relation to the verification of projects that are in the category of green taxonomy. In clause 1 of Article 17, there's some conflicting ideas. We'd like you to clarify that. We in this article that's stipulated that the individual organization who are in need of verifying the green in order to be able to enjoy the incentives from the government. However, in clause 10, that ended more condition, verification of the green can be used as a base in order to for the branch or the one headquarter of the foreign banks to issue to offer green credit. So in the clause 1 of Article 17, there's some conflicting points that need to be more clarified. For example, one individual organization which are not in need of enjoying preferential policy on the environmental protection law. If they want to enjoy one incentive for commercial activities, do they need to ask for verification or not? Or the commercial bank can be at their own disposal to make decisions based on the international standards? For example, VP Bank are following the IFC standard as they allowed to provide or grant green credit, or that must be approved by the competent authority of the government before we can approve that. If the commercial banks must dependent on the approval of the government of the green project, that would make it very difficult for us. Difficulty may be the green taxonomy of the bank is already available, but if it is a must for the customers to apply for verification of green, that would be very time consuming. And if once the draft is put into effective in November 2023, at the time the project and enterprises have no time to gain access or apply for the green certification from competent authorities of the government. The second part, some regulation in the clause 2 and 3 of Article 17, representative of VP Bank. Notice that regulation in the clause 2 and 3 in line with the law on environmental protection and Decree 08 issued 2022. However, there's missing some points for the projects that have gone through some environmental procedure before the decree, above mentioned decree, comes into force. Before that, we just talk about the registration for the environmental permit and license. However, there's some similar equivalent procedures such as environmental protection plan or commitment to protect environment that's not included into the legal documents. If that's not available, the operational enterprises, they no longer greenfield projects. If they register additionally for being certified as a green project, that they would face difficulty because in the NOSIA document there's nothing mentioning about that. Apart from that, at the clause 3, Article 17, there's no provision of the request for the verification of a green project so that they can be exempted from environmental tax. Apart from that, regulation on the green verification very suitable for many investment projects, for manufacturing investment project. However, they haven't taken into consideration other cases that are entitled to applying the green criteria as stated in the next one. For example, it's not applicable to individuals who are in need of buying electric vehicle or having a solar panel installed on their house, because that's not considered as an investment project as stipulated in the clause 3 and 4 Article 17. If they have need to gain access to the green credit, it's impossible for them to have access to that. And also we need the bank to clarify for the project that are stated the climate indicators are not limited. There's no criteria on that. So the next one, BP Bank would like to comment on the provision on clause 3 and 4 of Article 17. What's stipulated here is suitable with the manufacturing companies, but not suitable for the financial institution. For example, banking organization. When financial institutions want to issue the green bonds, they do not have don't have to undergo the legal procedures such as the environmental impact assessment, similarly to the manufacturing project. That dependent on investment portfolio that cover all the green projects, not only one green project. According to experience at the VP Bank, we implementing according to international common practice under the standards of the IFC. We conform to the green credit principle of the credit association in the Pacific. For issuance of the credit or the green bond, we need to conform to the 4 core values. Number one, we respect and we need to have a procedure to evaluate to define what is a green project, and we need to manage and have a transparent system of reporting. And to strengthen the accuracy and transparency, the Green Bank green credit policy framework advise that banks needs to have recourse to verification of the third reputable international organization. The second one, in the second form, giving accountability of the project that belongs to the green taxonomy, only suitable for manufacturing company not suitable for financial institution. The comments for next part in relation to the classification criteria in the green taxonomy, VP Bank is luckily to be one of the first bank that is allowed to participate in giving comments on the draft and the green credit. We are delighted that many of our proposal has been updated by drafting teams. So in my presentation, I would like to touch up on some key points. Number one, in relation to the clause 1, 2, 3, 4, A1 relating to renewable energies, particularly the solar power. The drafting team introducing an emission level for the solar power is 100 grams CO2 equivalent to 1 kilowatt hours. However, according to VP Bank experience, applying the IFC standard for the solar power project, they do not introduce emissions threshold. Probably the drafting team also wish that the green program of Vietnam will be observed more strictly that inherit the international standards. But according to VP Bank, for this type of project, it's not advisable to introduce such a threshold. The second comment, general comments on some other areas with proportion of energy saving, such as energy efficiency, is consider to introduce 5 or 70%. Rather than that, we need to stipulate for a minimum figure, a minimum 5% or 10%, and then saving energy that can be considered as green. Because the more energy we save, the better. But that's contradicting a little bit. If 5 or 10% is standard, but if we save 15 or 20%, is that okay? It's not so clear. So we need to introduce a minimum threshold for that purpose, for that reason. Other than that, there's another thing related to the use and use of waste. We have only the industry code, the 3S, 300 for recycle scrap. However, in our conference, we talk a lot about the circular economy. It's quite possible that enterprises, they use byproducts, gains acquired through the production as input for the enterprises. As such, they consider as contributing to reduction pollution and the use of renewable recycled products, even though they are not in a scrap handling enterprises. For example, for companies, they make use of the byproducts from the sea aquaculture to compress into the oil. So that is something that should be considered to recognize them as a green enterprises. Other than that, there are some other opinions for projects. We recognize for wind power and solar power. However, for projects that produce accessories or devices such as batteries for VinFast, will they be recognized or not? That's still missing in the green taxonomy. And additionally, the drafting team need to look into giving, including also environmental production elements such as technology to produce nylon plastic that's degradable plastic. So here's some of the brief comments of the VP Bank. Really wish that the agency and drafting team take that into account. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Mr. Trần Minh Hoàng, representative of VP Bank, for coming up with bringing on the very specific inputs and comments on the draft of Prime Minister decision and green taxonomy. And what you bring on here is very real, practical. For example, for green credits, the component of project financing according to statistical figures. The value may be very high, but in terms of quantity, that's not numerous. Whereas the small number is still considered as a green credit. The size may go up to 6 or 7 million different items. So that's something that drafting teams and 2 groups of experts can think differently in order to come up with the regulations that's more suitable with the practice. Based on the comments of DP Bank to carry on, I'd like to invite Madam Timita to give your comments, expertise comments before we can move on to the this afternoon session. We want to do it differently a little bit, besides collecting your inputs and comments. And this morning, the questions and comments we have passed on to the drafting team and the expert teams. Before the expert teams will interact with the delegates regarding your inputs and comments and questions. We'd like to additionally invite Madam Thao from the Bond Market Association to give a few comments. Madam Thao, please.
First, I would like to give a general feedback on the standard for green bond issuance. As you know, ICMA is the foundation for all bond issuance standards in Asian and countries in the region. And if we select ICMA or Asian standards or CDI standard, there are the taxonomies from these organizations. But in case the organizations in Vietnam do so, then our taxonomy will follow the same direction. As Mr. Mat mentioned this morning, that we are applying, we are following the ACMI standard. So in the process, that is for them to choose the standard. And as I understand that they cannot do so at the moment, or they would have the national issuance standard, and that should be in line with the taxonomies that is under discussion today. That is the framework, and everything we are doing originates from ICNA or Asian standards, and we need to be aligned on that. If we can answer that questions, then we can answer your questions. The question that you just mentioned. DP Bank, for example, they have their own international standard when they borrow from IFC, and they already implemented the framework. So they do have their taxonomies, and the important thing is that the investors, they accept it. So that is my opinion. There are some other feedbacks from my team relating to this topic. The terminology, we should add into Article 3 the definition of green bonds. And Article 7, Clause 1, Article 7. Article 5, Clause 5, Article 7 on projects that are not required to do a EIA, but that are required to do EIA, but not environmental license. And also Article 7, Clause 7. There is no definition of Group 1 and Group 2 according to the Environmental Protection Law. And there are some feedbacks on green bond issuance. If we applied this draft according to the regulation by MOF, what is the annual reports for the monitoring of the implementation of this draft? And what is the validation of the MONRE? Should it be done once or repetitively year by year? And is there any regulation for validation and annual reports? The identification of green projects and related benefits. Which documents regulate and specify this process and how? So we need to discuss in detail about this. The categories of projects and also the extended procedure that may affect businesses that want to do these projects. And the drafting team should review environmental friendly businesses such as biodegradable plastic bags, manufacturing. The idea is that to go back to waste management. If we in Vietnam really need a guideline that should be in line with what we are doing here. Thank you very much, Ms. Thảo. And I really appreciate your first feedback on the fact that there are many different types of validation and not only local validation, but we should be in line with global validation as well. And what is our approach? In the previous workshop, we have an article stipulates the harmony and the alignment with the international validation. And if we implement the draft decision by the PM, that is one of the requirements based on international practices. There is the validation, the justification of a third party required SPO and audits and also experts verification, and after that scoring. So the verification of the third party is one step, and if you can't if you have all 4 steps, then you are considered accepted by international standard. But if we are going to implement such standard, then how it's gonna be in the Vietnam context? So please consider the drafting team and the experts. This is also the opinions of Mr. Dũng, International Corporation of GSC and Mr. Yu. In order to keep the discussion going, I want to ask the floor if you have any other questions before the experts give their opinions. If you have any questions or feedbacks, you can raise your voice right away. Based on the feedbacks so far, you can add it to the discussion. Participants in the room or online, if you have any feedbacks, any questions, please raise your hands, and we are eager to collect your opinions. Even if you already sent your feedbacks in writings, you can also bring your opinion forward for more discussion. We encourage you to speak up, please. Please introduce yourself, your name and your organization. This is a very interesting workshop. My name is Vin. I am a member, a consultant of the Association of Wind and Solar Power. I'm working for the Technology University of Ho Chi Minh City. My job is related to the power industry, and I have been involved in the renewable energy sector for quite some time, and I have some thinking We are not a industrial country. Vietnam is an agricultural country, and pollution mostly originates from big cities. So when you consider the green factor, Vietnam is considered a green manufacturer. Actually, there are bigger groups that are producing cements, steels, etc. They generate big waste, and it is measurable. So the emission is not a problem that originates from Vietnamese businesses, but FDI businesses such as Korean, Japanese, German companies. And renewable energy, I think it should be restructured to be 27% renewable energy, and we should reduce our coal energy to about 35%. Energy sources, I would say that Vietnam is leading in terms of green manufacturing. Green credit and the lenders for solar and wind farms. There is a problem of emission, even though the projects contribute to emission reduction. But in reality, these projects are impacting lives a lot on the stream farms and also on humans' health. When a solar farm is developed, the forest is destroyed. I am not referring to Ninh Thuận, this area. There is no forest in this area, but there are in other locations. So when you lend owners of such projects credits, is it considered the green credits? I'm discussing the environmental impact in general, and when we have such projects, do we provide create more jobs and generate higher incomes for people in the neighborhood? That is the social impact of projects. Most of the projects now are receiving loans at 11%, 12%. Not many enjoy 10% interest rate. So you are providing bonds at quite high green credits at a very high interest rate. There should be policies to encourage businesses to enjoy better interest. Why other organizations they enjoy low interest, but then they re-lend the credits to the business at a higher interest to enjoy the profit. So there should be a mechanism to protect businesses as well. Most of the projects are now borrowing at 11 to 12% interest rate. Another feedback that I want to mention is the risk, the quality of the energy. The energy efficiency. Energy efficiency, 8%, 10%. How do you measure the efficiency? And we need a method to identify, to measure the green factors of a project. Wastewater recycle. I participated in a project that used green credits in 2018. SK UNDP oil and gas, Vietnam Petrol, and Tây Ninh government, provincial government, they grew 4 hectares of forest, and technology university technology was part of a project. So green credits and green bonds as solar and wind projects receive the green bond, green credits after some times of operation. They cannot generate, and they do not generate power, or only 20% of their power. How do they handle such cases? So the green factor, or is green or dirty? How do we identify a project on these criteria? Maybe based on some criteria, the project is green, but not so in other aspects. I think it should be a non-carbon project. Firstly, we have 300. Our economy is 350 billion USD. There are bigger economies, and we cannot apply the same green taxonomy. We need to build our own green taxonomy, and we need to make it strong and applicable, or else we will make our own business rules on their own playground. We need to think of a mechanism to protect Vietnamese business and create a win-win situation. There are many organizations that will sell green credits into Vietnam, but who will accept them? If we export our products to EU and to the US, there will be requirements on green certificates, and if we buy the certificates, the production cost will increase by 15% to 20%. Let's say that we export a coconut at 50, 70 thousand dollars, but it is 100 dollars will come to the EU market. So we need to create a policy to make it win-win for the regulators and the businesses, or else we cannot compete with other countries. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for the feedbacks from Association of Wind Power. As Mr. Tuan recommendation, we're going to have a break for 15 minutes, and then but before we start the break, Dr. Phu Nam and Dr. Lai Văn Mat, please prepare with your team. Have an internal preparation, because we're going to have 40 minutes for explanation and answering, responding to the feedback so far, and answering the questions that we have received this morning, and also in the first half of the afternoon. We are going to give you 40 minutes, and the last part of the workshop is dedicated for the scientists. We have 8 scientists in the workshop, so let's have a break of 15 minutes, and please return on time so we can have enough time for everybody. Thank you very much.
Thứ ba về ghép tay, chưa tiếp tay, ghép không ra, ghép không ra để lại ra. Ngoài tỉnh của Lao em
mới ăn xong không
lò luôn.
I'd like to invite all of you to get back to the ballroom so that we can continue our agenda.
Cái đội phát biểu luôn à? À thế. Vâng. Báo cáo các
Ladies and gentlemen, in the round table discussion, as I have just discussed with Dr. Park, we want to move the interactive sessions of the two groups of experts, of the drafting team and your delegates, to the end of this session. Now, we'd like to move the presentation of scientists ahead, so as we can, if anyone wants to have comments, and we move the comments and Q&A session to the end, and we can conclude the workshop later on more completely. So in order to carry on, I'd like to invite Associate Professor Nguyễn Hồng Quân, the Director of the Ho Chi Minh City Circular Economic Institute. Mr. Quân, are you here? I'd like to kindly request Mr. Quân to turn on your webcam so that we can share your screen. The technical team will display your presentation on the screen. The second speaker is Associate Professor Phùng Thúy Sĩ, the Deputy Chairman of the Association for Nature and Environmental Protection. Please get yourself ready. Phương, can you see the screen? Mr. Quân just let us know that he just signed out. Now I would like to formally invite Associate Professor Phùng Thúy Sĩ. I wonder if Mr. Sĩ is ready. It's up to you. You can stand there or come forward. It's up to you. So allow me to stand here to my presentation, Mr. Toàn, Mr. Hai, Chairman of the workshop today, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I have opportunity to attend both of the workshops for the first time that was held on the 27th of April, in which I have commented on criteria for the green taxonomy And today I attend the workshop in person. My comments I have shared with Mr. Bình already, so let me just summarize a few points in the workshop today. First of all, we highly appreciate the efforts put in by the drafting team and expert team so that we can come up with a very detailed, comprehensive, informative draft. However, in order to make the draft more complete, we'd like to share a few more comments. Just now, some experts from the banks and some previous speakers also share some comments that are the same with me. So for what the same, I would like to skip in order to save time. First of all, I can see the name of the decision, the title of the decision. What is that here? The Prime Minister decision on promulgation of the environmental criteria, verification of the green project, issuance of green credit and bond. But however, in the first part of the next, we just mentioned about the criteria without mentioning about the verification. Article 1, the scope of application. The title of the decision and the title of the annex, and the third one is a scope of application are not consistent. First of all, we need to identify the criteria. It's clear. Second one is scope of application. The third one is verification. I would like to draw your attention to the way how to name it, so that the three contents, as just mentioned, are consistently understood. The second comment I'd like to raise is the subject to this. So then the title decide the project. The verification of the projects that are granted with credit, and the project items. Project and project items, of course. It sounds inconsistent. If we want to keep both project item, it's okay. Put it in a bracket here enough to refer to as a project. That's okay. So project, the people already understand that is a project. That's the second comment. If possible, let's agree on the terms here. As for the subject of application, just now people just mentioned about the subject of application can be individual. And secondly, organization, individual and enterprises. We just need to know the individual, organization. Enterprises can be considered as an organization, so that's somehow redundant, unnecessarily redundant. And just like Decree 08, I think this could be applicable to the new projects, including expanded and upgraded projects, and for the existing operational establishment, they also have right to issue bond in order to enjoy from credit. They're not only limited to applying to project or project items. And in Decree 08, that's stated existing operational premises and establishment that are considered as equal to project. So we need to make it clear about this point. And the third article, for such subject of application, we need to make it clearer, because the next article, in Article 7, we talk about the procedures to conduct environmental impact assessment, procedure for applying for permit. What about the project items that are not subject to the permission of the environmental impact assessment? So how to use rephrase the wording so that people understand more clearly. there's some entities that's not fallen under the category of the project. They're already friendly to environment. They do not have to do anything that can be granted with the credit right away. So we need to distinguish between different subjects, make it clear. With regards to explanation, interpretation of terms, I could see some of the phrases, some words that can be merged into one. The terms threshold and criteria. There are two different terms. Threshold must be either one absolute figure. Cannot say in a range of 5 to 7. Threshold often applicable to the environmental parameters such as a load parameter, threshold or measurement threshold. However, the criteria can be varied. We have a technical, social, economic criteria. There are various criteria. Whereas in the Article 1, a green project must satisfy the criteria of threshold. Criteria, either we just can choose either threshold or criteria. Green taxonomy, what kind of threshold they satisfy the environmental threshold or similar to Article 3, including water, energy, and effluents. So there's some conflicting interpretation between Article 1 and Article 3. According to me, later on we have a BRT, we have a collection of the social, economic, technical parameters. Whichever project satisfy that can be included as a green project, not only reaching the threshold of technical, but also social and economic threshold. Many projects, for example, we reduce fuel use, we recycle waste, reuse energy, like environment green. Mentioned about the environmental factor. Next point, the so-called environmental criteria. There are some criteria we try our best to based on law, but however, there's some points that's not so clear. For example, the environment criteria that not affecting, not causing significant harms. If writing in such a way, many projects impossible for us to identify it as green or not. Otherwise, we can add one more item, such as environmental criteria. Accordingly, as long as you meet the technical requirement parameter, that's acceptable. Secondly, if regarding the administrative procedures, whoever have the EIA approved, that's already fine. Otherwise, reading that heading sentence, that's very difficult for us to verify that. And that is about the criteria. There is a variety, a wide range of terms in one sentence. If we cannot clarify that, it would make it very difficult to understand this one thing. Firstly, there's one term, Article 6, verifying and confirming the list. Confirming and verifying as a difference. Verifying for the regulatory agency and confirming confirmation is for specific project. So in these two terms, if we cannot define and differentiate that, that will be misleading. Secondly, there's some easily confusing terms. Sometimes we refer to it as a criteria, and sometimes we refer to it as indicators. And the goal, in one sentence, there's three terms: criteria, indicators, and goals. We need to really clearly define that, otherwise it's really confusing. Criteria, I think we conduct assessment based on with parameter. If you have that parameter, I can prove that it's satisfied. Criteria and indicators and goals, there are specific figures for us to reach. So either we can use the word indicators, sometimes there are goals. Goals and indicators, maybe in Vietnamese, the same. If we want to reach the goal or indicators, which terms we use, make it easier for us to understand. Otherwise, in a sentence, when I read that, I find it very difficult to understand. And next part has some minor things, minor points when we are talking about the decision that's conforming to such a decrease. I think that we want to refer to decrease 08. That's something requiring projects to conform to the master plan of environment protection. Or there's the only one master plan, national environment. So we have to make it clear, ensure to conform to the national environmental protection. And on the provincial master plan, also one integral part of the national master plan. If we want to refer to a project as a provincial project, we can refer to the provincial environmental protection. Otherwise, we stated as a national environment protection. And for the scope and condition of application, we need to separate one as a project that's different from the project item. Project items are not subject to BOT, and so we need to separate into three different groups. Clearer. Sometimes that doesn't need the BTM, doesn't need the EIA. It's already able to be granted with a permit. For each individual subject, that's subject to different procedures. The next point about the next. Actually, in my previous comments, you have already absorbed a lot. But here in today's session, as you can see, that the agricultural waste, in reality, after the pandemic, H5N1 and green earthquake disease that affect a lot of the waste, and the COVID-19 pandemic on the waste on the drainage water. If the project generates such kind of waste, if that lost as part of the natural catastrophe, overspill of oil can be part of that. Ho Chi Minh City has a secret project in countries. For example, we segregation of the septic tanks sludge. I wonder whether that belongs to this green project. There's one factory in Ho Chi Minh City named Farming to collect the sludge or the mud as a result of dredging activities. Ho Chi Minh City has a Saigon Green company that's in charge of collecting all the mud deriving from the dredging activities of the polluted canals and not to mention the construction related waste. many projects like a JICA, there's a doing with the treatment of the construction waste. And in the law, mentioned also the waste of the electricity, electronic manufacturing process, and the cumbersome waste such as cabinet, table, chairs, or if any sentence, any wording mentioned about that, because that occupy big quantity, we can merge into certain categories so that we make sure to cover all the areas. And for example, if we talk about the solid waste, including collection, recycle, and disposal, or wastewater, how to treat that. Similarly for the effluent or waste emission, if you recycle that, will you still be considered as a green project? Solid waste incorporates a lot of things from collection, processing, transportation. So that is some of the points I'd like to raise here. As I said from the beginning, I highly appreciate this draft. However, some of our comments I would like to kindly request you to be selective. Whatever suitable, you can include. Not suitable, you can take it out. Thank you, Associate Professor Dr. And now I'd like to formally invite Associate Professor Nguyễn Hồng Quân, the Director of the Institute for Circular Economy Development. Professor Quân, please. And thank you, the Chairman. I stay outside. It's not convenient for me to turn the camera on. So thank you, organizing committee, for allowing me to join the workshop today. Allow me to raise 2 points. Number one, relating to the approach of the environmental protection regulation. Whether or not our project is green or not green, they are always subject to environmental impact assessment. When you use that EIA as a criteria, it's not so suitable. If we redo one EIA of something that has been done previously, that would be not so suitable. That's my personal point of view. Secondly, the nature of the EIA, we identify the environment-related problems which are negative, so that we can come up with the preventive measures to prevent that from happening. But for the green financing project that are more in light towards the positive aspect rather than negative aspects. If we use a negative one to turn it into a positive, I find it not so suitable. The second one, we have come up with very interesting incentive. For example, the green label, that's very positive. But I think the fact that we use environmental labels as a criterion, maybe it's not quite suitable. I think that is the most important points that I would like to raise. The second one, pretty minor, but very important. This morning, I hear one comment from the one bank's representative. The regulation on the green credit what is very important, especially in relation to the donors and investors. For example, if we raise, especially when the commercial banks raise funds, in many cases they do not have resources because they have to rely on the investors to take a loan from them, or they can invest from their own capital source. Sometimes the other lenders have other requests that the borrowers have to follow, and the all of these other requirements are hardly mentioned in the EIA. So there's some have to take into account some requirement of the financial institution that investors they are also looking into that. We must be very selective, otherwise the banks would have no resources for lending, especially for the external resources from the pension fund or the insurance fund. I think that they would not interested too much in EIA. What benefits the EIA can bring about? There are only two minor comments from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nahat Quân. Can I suggest Dr. Lê Hồng Anh to give his feedback? Dr. Lê Hồng Anh from the University of Industries, Ho Chi Minh City. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizer for the opportunity to join the expert roundtable. On the criteria, I have no comments, but I have some comments on the mechanism to develop the green credit and green bond. Please close down. Associate Professor, please raise your micro a bit higher. So here is my comment. In the world, there are regulations on green credit, and as you can see here, bank also mentioned very detailed standards on the green credit. And in here, in this slide, you can see the objectives of green credit. Green credit is a form of credit and capital financing. They may have a loan to buy a vehicle or to install a solar rooftop or to improve their heating system, to have better energy efficiency, or to build a zero emission building, or to invest in a water system of a park. So these are the purposes of green credit. The World Bank, they have their green credit principle based on the purpose of the loan, evaluation and selection of projects, and so on. This is the version number 2021, February 2021 of green credit principles by the Loan Markets Association. Their basic principles and the principle applicable for green credit. I can say that financial credit institutes around the world have their own clear processes and standards for green credit issuance. There are international principles for green credit and green bond. And it is clearly stated that 100% of the amount of money received should be used for green qualified activities, and green credit institutes acquire green credit and attribute to the businesses or individuals. So green bonds and green credit have a close relation, green credits is often used by individual and smaller business, while green bonds are applicable for bigger projects. And here are some of my recommendations. The name that is applied for the projects. I think the framework's name is quite too detailed. You can call it a framework for a green bond and green credit, and it is applicable on this national level. They can update to the framework to make it more aligned with the international framework. However, this national framework is applicable for all and every organization in Vietnam, and the purpose is to achieve the sustainable the green growth strategy in Vietnam, and to realize the commitment of the Prime Minister at COP20, national frameworks to support Vietnamese businesses to be able to access to international credit. And the Vietnamese businesses, they can also issue green bonds to the global market. So the national framework is very important, but not only to issues for the issuance of the government. It is an open gate to the Vietnamese business to access a larger capital market internationally. The role of Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment is to build a national framework and to make amendment to the framework. So this is an extremely important responsibility, and the businesses, if they want to access to green credits, they have to go through a consultant, and we can monitor if the process in place is legal and valid. The taxonomy is important in Vietnam, and also we should issue it as soon as possible. Maybe the taxonomy is not complete at the time of issuance, but it can be improved year by year. We can also make public that the projects financed by green credit are known to the general public, not only by the bank, but also other institutes. So you can see that the green taxonomy is a foundation for the implementation and the monitoring of green credit issuance. I will not go deep into the investment project and the needs to perform EIA for such project, because this is a must to perform EIA for all projects we want to implement in Vietnam. And there are also other small households who want green credits for personal, and it is impossible to perform EIA. So I think this should be a national framework for the green credit. We have the Green Credit Foundation, Credit Fund, and in Green Credit Issuers, and the consultant and the borrower. For the consultant, their start is to create a dossier, prepare the evidence to prove that this is a green project. The consultant can also support credit issuance to evaluate the dossier. So the lender, the borrower, and the consultants are three stakeholders in this process. The ministry is the monitor of the whole process and the one who issues the loan framework. And this process will be light and easy to perform by the credit institutes in Vietnam. I totally agree with the environmental criteria. These criteria help to measure and quantify, and also to contribute to the national strategy on the environmental protection. The green taxonomy of a nation needs to be able to contribute to the national strategy. So that is the difference between other frameworks and this framework. I want to make some conclusion points. The market of green credit and green bonds is extremely important to Vietnam to allow Vietnam to develop its economy and also to attract capital and also to meet the commitment at COP26. The market needs a favorable condition with a strong legal framework to develop. We need a framework to set the playground for the actors in the market to develop, but we will not set strict regulation to require them to ask permission for every activities. If a business want to have a green loan from the bank, they can have the process in place and they can follow it, and they can make sure that they are legal. The loan and the process is legal. So that could make it easier for the stakeholders involved. And the ministry and the government should create a framework for all the credit institutes in Vietnam to follow the lenders, the borrowers, and the consultants have a clear regulation to follow. We are the monitor of the policy makers, and we can look at from the higher level to have an overview of the market. And yes, these are my feedbacks for the draft of the decision. Thank you very much, Associate Professor Leong Anh. It is very systematic. I also want to listen to Dr. Hồ Quốc Thông, Economic Faculty, University of the Economy of Ho Chi Minh City. He's joining us online. Good afternoon. Can I share my screen? I am joining online and I can share now. Please help us to share my screen.
Rồi, kính thưa ban tổ chức, thế thì tôi cũng rất cảm ơn.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, organizing committee, for allowing me to contribute some of the comments relating to the completion of the draft on environmental criteria and one criteria for consideration of a green project. At the request of organizing committee, let me share with you a few comments relating to energy sector. More specifically, when I share some personal comments, let me introduce. I come from the Ho Chi Minh City Economics University, and over the past few years, the process of preparing for the law on environmental protection in 2020 with participation of ISPONRE and the MONRE approved for the chapter of conformity to the environment and environmental protection. the intervention of the government in social environment protection, including legal legislative device and to intervene for behavioral change. There's some regulation on tax and tax policy, aiming at mitigating negative impact of the projects. As for the approach to the green credit and green bonds, different issues for the project that generate externality, the positive impact regarding the green sustainable development. My system two parts. The first one is general comments, and the second one comments on energy. After the short period of time looking into this draft, I could see that it's very important policy towards sustainable development and environment protections that are in line with the world's trend. I highly appreciate the efforts put in by the drafting team by incorporating the lesson learned from international market. You have integrated in the regulation of Vietnam. That is something that I'm very impressed. And however, I also want to share a few more detailed idea contribution for your consideration. For example, when we developed this policy, Vietnam is characterized as a country with very long coastal line. When I read the documents and considering some other aspects, the ocean space master planning are closely linked to the development of wind power, ocean power, and solar power. And this is a close link between different policy. As you know, that when once policies stand alone, difficult to solve the big problems such as green growth. Here and there in the point 2, clause 2, article 4, regulating the sea space master planning, even though this concept is rather not concretized in the legal documents in Vietnam. General comments, the subject that are applicable for applying this, we may want to consider to add some household and collectives, because later on some models like collective model, they can step in this sector to build a wind farm or solar farm. They may be also one subject to be regulated by these documents. One more point, we see some sentences with a dot. So we need to, that means you still have more to be included. Another point similar to the other comments, even though the project, most projects has a EIA, but here are the projects that can benefit from the green credit and green bond programs. In the such projects, as we try to solicit the private sector to engage in the supply of energy. Here and there, some project can solve the environment-related problems, but at the same time causing other environmental problems that are exemplified by some of the ideas that you presented this afternoon. So even though we have EIA available, but we need to analyze cost and benefit. What are the positive impact? What are the negative impact? We need to weigh between two factors. There are many things, many projects. We aiming at solving the plastic-related pollution. For example, we produce many organic straw, that would have protect environment greatly rather than using plastic. The recycle waste. But if you use outdated technologies that are not that cannot ensure the parameter for environmental protection, that would cause a big problems. Water and air pollution. And in some of our project, we are meant to aggregate lessons learned from international friends and lessons learned such as when we do master planning and looking at the distribution of the developed countries such as in the EU, some specific regulation on the sea spatial master planning. We can refer to that. In Vietnam, there's some policy related to the sea spatial master planning and ocean energy related projects. Detailed comments on specific lists such as solar power in Annex A1. Is it advisable to consider the technology-related criteria? When I read the document, issues of applying different technologies resulting in changeable life cycle of technologies of the photovoltaic panel, or the use heavy metal use photovoltaic battery, and also affecting the life cycle of the battery. I have no background in technology, but it's advisable to take certain extent in consideration the element of technology. Another part for projects using the reusable photovoltaic panel. As an expert in the circular economy, we may want to consider that. As for the wind power, apart from the criteria such as capacity or the size of the project, I think that if possible, we may want to consider the noise pollution, because one of the side effects of wind power technology that may generate noise that affect the conservation areas, especially for those the residents living onshore near that area. And for the thermal power project in areas that severely suffer from earthquake, the ground is very weak, so we need to take in thorough consideration, provided that they are all included into the local master plan. As for the bioenergy in clause 8, 10, and 12, we need to consider the capacity and area of land use, or the efficiency of natural resources use. That also very much concern the land use and climate change. As for the ocean or sea energy, we may consider the distance between that area and the conservation area to avoid that when we achieve one goal but that affect other goals. As for the transmission system, we may take the safety criteria, risk prevention criteria into consideration. For example, the exploding risk and other safety criteria. As for the we need to come up with the priority criteria to reuse the energy coming from the source of battery. So the other contents relating to the energy production, I have no comments. The point 9, we may apply international certification and may consider to add the project that reuse, recycle the batteries and the management and recycle of this waste is big issues in Vietnam currently. There's some of the general comments and some detailed comments I would like to share with the drafting team. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hồ Quốc Phong. And now I'd like to invite Dr. Hồ Quốc Hòa from the Management Institute, National Management Institute, to give his feedback. Good afternoon. Mr. Hai, can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you well. You can also lower your voice a little bit. It's still okay. Do you see my slide? Yes, we see it. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me to the discussion to give feedback on the draft. I really appreciate the draft for the division, because this will be the solution for many problems, regulations, issues we are facing to this day. We have environmental protection law, and it specifies regulations on the carbon market, green bonds, and green credit, and also the strategy into 2030, and also green procurement as well. All these are the regulations for the next period. And the scheme on the circular economy and the timeline to achieve the commitment of CLP 26. So we need to have a green taxonomy in order to access to the capital from in Vietnam and from foreign countries. The lenders, they are aiming at the green economy and to fulfill their corporate social responsibility and to reimburse the green credit. But when a business wants to access to green credit, it is impossible for them, especially these small and medium enterprises. We have done some survey fund at ministry levels. There is the capital and the policy, but it is impossible to grant the loans for small and medium enterprises. They are prioritized because they have green projects, but because there is a lack of framework and guidelines, so it is impossible to progress. And this is the bottleneck that we need to overcome in order to successfully implement effectively the policies in place. So I believe that this draft, this decision is gonna be the solution for all the issues so far. In the morning and in the afternoon, there are many feedbacks, and I can say that the name is quite complicated, and it is not aligned with the content. We can call it the framework for environmental criteria by the Prime Minister. In the content, there are many green products related to this framework, so we don't need to repeat green bond and green credit and so on. And second feedback, we need to identify clearly the subjects of application. This framework serves the government and the private sector, individual or organizations. They will use this framework. This is not only to serve project owners of green projects. Any business can access to financial institutes and banks to access a green credit. Why do we limit the frameworks only to businesses who wish to enjoy the incentives from the government? We need to identify the framework as the tool or the process for all businesses that want to access to green credit or want to participate in the tender process. I want to emphasize again that the national framework should be applicable to the government, governmental agencies, well, that they are following a strategy to 2030 with a vision to 2050. It is required the governmental agencies to have detailed guidelines on green procurement. So this framework is applicable to them as well. Other banks and commercial banks, they have a green credit program, and it is out of their web. They outside of the environmental awareness, they wish to fulfill their corporate social responsibilities. So they have priorities for green projects, and if they want to implement their strategy in that way, they can refer to this framework, but not waiting for instruction and permission from governmental agencies. That leads to increased time and cost. So that will provide businesses with more proactiveness. They can access green credit, and they can also issue green bonds. Why not? If we identified that this framework is only subject to, is only applicable to the government, it is so limited. There are the demands from other stakeholders as well. If the framework is only to support the government, and it is too narrow scope of application. Going back to the framework criteria, I think it is applicable to green procurement as well. The private sector, in the private sector, there are big businesses that want to improve their image and also to fulfill their CSR. In the next 2 years, 3 years, European countries will adjust their carbon boundaries and require the exporters to buy carbon credit in order to the importers to buy carbon credits in order to buy from exporters from other countries. So this is the tool for Vietnamese business to approach the situation. In the future, the government issues a national framework, a general framework for other stakeholders with the clear code systems and a clear industrial classification system, so that during implementation we can extract the data and make a comparison basically, this is they can do evaluation, and they can hire a third party to validate their green certificate, and also to make decisions on their own, to make investment decisions and decision on selecting the investors and the contractors. This is the framework for all of those activities to certify themselves as qualified for a tender, and also criteria for green procurement. It is a must task that must to be implemented. We need to do this. So all of these activities are necessary to be done. Another point that I see in the decision draft, to grant the governmental body the power to validate a project as a green, there is a risk the market is big and the demand is high. If only governments can validate the green status for projects, it would be very long, and they don't have the capabilities to handle all the demands. The Ministry of Trade and Commerce, they follow this approach when it comes to green labeling. However, they need to attribute the task to third parties. If you need to wait for like years in order to have a green label to put it on your products, and it is a danger. So I know I need to have to go through a long procedure in order to become a green project. Then I will lose the opportunities of foreign capital, and many investors may leave during that time. So investors want to act quickly, and if there is a procedure that helps them, that makes them to wait for so long, it will be a failure. And the business, when they want to have a loan, and the foreign capital flows in and trust to green project, they spend a lot of time on building the project, and then more time to wait for the validation of a green project by a governmental body. It is so time and cost consuming. Instead, they can do the validation after there is a set of criteria, and there are foreign criteria in place as well. Why do we have to force it to be with these criteria for the validation? In the resolution number 8, only taxes that the government, private sectors cannot do, and the government, it will be assigned to a governmental body. So that is to create a clear and efficient legal corridor for the economy. But if we have only governmental agencies to do, then it will go in the opposite way of the general direction. So please consider, and where the projects that are not described or included in the framework, and it is unable to be validated by the market, and in that case, a governmental body will step in and do the validation. For public investment, there will be a different regulation, but this is for it is a general framework for all the economic actors. We can have tender process in place as well. We don't apply the tender process and procurement of the private sector. Why do we have to have that regulation? Why it's not a requirement? We can use the criteria in the current procurement, and the criteria should be published on the website. It should be easy to understand, easy to compare. As well, the code labels are also very important for validation. We also need to have the government play an active role in this process in order to have good implementation of the regulation. I don't have a lot of time, so I only address key feedbacks, and from my 20 years experience working in this field, and I have been interested in the environmental protection for 1,000 years. So thanks for the opportunity for me to share all of these thinking with you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Hồ Công Hòa. You have provided very practical feedbacks and also requirements. The drafting team and the experts group, we have recorded your feedbacks and will incorporate them in the next phase. And next on the agenda, I'd like to invite Dr. Lê Thế Anh, Grid Center, Hanoi, to provide the feedbacks. He's joining us online.
Thank you very much, organizing committee, ladies and gentlemen. This is the first time I have opportunity to be to read through this after the Prime Minister decision. At the request of the organizing committee, I'm supposed to give the general comments on the draft of this decision with focus on the list of agricultural projects. I have read thoroughly this draft, and I have a few impressions as follows. First of all, this is a legislative tool we can use as a framework for us to screen the projects, activities that in this case they are referred to as a green projects that are supposed to contribute to environmental protection, reduction of the greenhouse gas, incorporate of activities so as we can enable us to receive credit and bond incentives at a different extent. Seen from perspective of environmentalist, I can say that even though we are approaching slowly, this kind of concept has been applied by many countries. Personally, I agree with what Mr. Hoa raised. Even though the draft only comprises of some dozens of pages, but the list is quite numerous. Even though they are quite broad, but then they have not covered all the activities or the form of businesses they want to to look for. Even though I highly appreciate the drafting team and efforts put in by different parties, especially the consulting team, but I have personal opinion that we need to develop a kind of screening criteria instead of reading the naming the project and then introduce very generalized criteria. We do not know whether we should apply the land law or the law of agriculture. I don't want to say that's wrong or right, but I have the opinion that we need to develop a project so as any project, any operation that meet the criteria are entitled to the financial incentives. In this case, as a credit and bond, and later on they can enjoy the value added. In this case, that is a tax and the environmental fees. More importantly, they receive the permits for introducing or launching their products into the world market to compete with the world market once they satisfy the criteria in order to be referred to as a green project. So the scope of application, how to generalized in a way so that it can cover all of these above mentioned. So the playground that we have created only devoted to the project and businesses operating within the territory of Vietnam. The common playground is an international playground for the more challenging markets. Next one is for new projects. Obviously, we can access very easily when we carry out procedures for granting investment permits. But for the existing operational projects, they will have some kind of investment for renovating, improving the technology, refurbishing, retrofitting equipment in order to gearing towards more environmental friendly production premise. So whether all of our criteria are guaranteed to cover all of these above mentioned. So next one is the name. We need to consistently refer to one name. Sometimes we refer to it one project, and sometimes we refer to activities. One project has many items, many activities, but there's only one activities or one item that satisfies such criteria. Whether in this case our project can be considered as one green project. I'm very much concerned if we name the project after the name of economic industrial group. We need to reconsider, because there's something that is not sufficiently, not adequately cover all of the subject from the different legal entities and other many projects with various components. Not to mention the project directly, they can be very environmental friendly, but indirectly they are causing harm to the environment, and vice versa. How to treat such cases. After some working visit to the provinces, I observed some low carbon husbandry households. They can raise only 5 pigs and generate biogas. That's sufficient for 5 households. So that contribute to help them replace traditional fuel. So whether they can be considered as green or not, that's something that we need to consider. The next one, I would like to go into more specifically the projects that the presiding agency requested me. I have a detailed comments. Allow me to send that, forward that to you later. Now I just want to briefly describe some key points. I have read through on list of agricultural projects So that is not adequately reflected. At the same time, redundant, and on the other hand, that's a lacking of some criteria. And we refer to British for agricultural activities and aquaculture. For newly established project, how can they satisfy a gap or total gap? There must be an operational project. Can they hope to satisfy such criteria? And after process production in which they conform to very strict regulation, so as they can be evaluated as satisfactory or not. But we consider as a better husbandry or plantation project doesn't make sense. So secondly, some of the projects they can invest right from the beginning, or they are applied that, but they are not certified as a VietGAP or global gap. But obviously during the production time, they are conforming to the principles of the circular economy. In that case, are they eligible to be part of this program or not? If we look into the criteria that we introduce in the draft, that would make it difficult, very difficult for the future projects to gain access to this criteria. Let me, on the basis, I just want to reiterate my point of view. If we introduce a set of criteria for screening for all the projects that are in the preparation process for investment or the existing operational projects, we can give appropriate name according to the economic industries, and so that they can apply the suitable criteria and requirement. For example, we refer to decrees or certain laws, and which article. That's something that we are concerned about. The second one, we agree with what Mr. C mentioned about what are the thresholds. For example, we have an investment project for greenhouse gas. I can meet the requirement at that extent, or whether I'm satisfied or not, or must I achieve 100% for the agricultural project that I have read through. For example, some model BAC or RBAC, whether they are meeting the criteria set forth by us or not. So allow that is some of the comments I would like to share with the organizing committee and participants. And for the detailed comments, I will forward to the drafting team. Let me reiterate, that's just reflect my personal point of view only, not imposing on drafting team at all, but obviously in order to ensure the feasibility study, but in the drafting process, we hope that the drafting team can use accurate terms. For example, indigenous agriculture. That term is very difficult to define. Secondly, for the projects that meet locally issued regulation and standard, according to my understanding, there's only some localities, including Hanoi, Quảng Ninh, and the big city, they issue the environment standard. As for the national standard on environment issued by MONRE and Ministry of Science Technology, are we supposed to apply that or not? So drafting team, would you please review so that we can make sure to use accurate terms and criteria for screening most appropriately. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Associate Professor Lưu Thế Anh. I really hope that you can soon send your detailed comments on the draft. We have one more scientist who wants to comment. Allow me to invite Mr. Nguyễn Thành Luân, who is also online. He's from the Institute of the Irrigation Science.
Please put the slides on. Okay, we can see the slides now. Mr. Lun, can you hear us? Yes, we can hear you. Please try to keep the control of time, maybe 7 minutes, so that we can have time for all the parts as well. Yes, thank you very much for inviting me to the roundtable discussion, because the time is running. So I just want to mention the content that relates to irrigation and our daily work. So the water and water management. I want to have a comment on the subject of application. I combined all the feedbacks from my team on the instruction and international practices. The subjects of research. In water management, there are 9 activities: monitoring, collection and transfer of water, retention of water, processing of water, desalination of water, the prevention of flood, prevention of drought, water management and management of the ecosystem related to water surface. Through the economic activity in the water-related projects, there are 2 organizations and project owners that give green bonds and green credits. The first is the infrastructure and the designing of water management structure, and the structures that retain and serve water. These are my feedback for the draft. As I already sent a detailed document to explain on the comments, I just want to go through them briefly here. First, there is a lack of water retention related activities. There is no such mention in the draft, and the system of ponds and retention bodies, water bodies, and also the criteria, screening criteria. I totally agree with the previous feedbacks and comments. Water resources and irrigation. This is more technical, and if we include it in the threshold and indicators of the draft, I think it would provide a more detailed instruction for each activity. These are technical indicators. And second, comments on the protecting water source and how should we do this in point C. It is not clear of the actors and the plan and the prevention plan during the responding plan during drought. For example, using water efficiently, installment and operation of water resource efficiency system This is a big task, and actually the water retention system and irrigation and national disaster prevention have big responsibility in retaining and transferring water. There are two recommendations I want to send to you. The first is making addition to the irrigation structure. We have the roles and the responsibilities and the functions of the irrigation system to the water management in general by 2050. We have the task and the assessments for the structure and also additional function of natural disaster prevention. So please refer to these documents. And the second recommendation is on the use of water and rural environmental hygiene. There are regulations and strategies by government in developing water resources for the development, for rural development, and the projects that can be financed by green credit and green bonds should be very clear on the criteria, environmental criteria related to this matter. So I don't have a lot of time for my presentation, so just quickly go through the key points in my recommendation. For the detailed criteria for each activity related to these systems, please contact us for more discussion, or can provide you with more details in writing. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Dr. Nguyễn Thành Vân. So we've listened to the 11 scientists, and there are 5 commenters from commercial banks and businesses. The rest scientists combined with the questions and the comments that we collected so far. We have sent all the opinions to the expert group. Based on the agenda, we have only 5 minutes left, so do you agree to stay until 5:30 so that we have enough more time? I suggest with the experts that please select only the important points that need interaction and direct discussion to raise for the next part. Comments and feedbacks. We're going to have 2 reports, master reports, where you can incorporate the comments in the future reports. And now I would give the floor to Dr. Nam. Please choose some important points that you want to discuss with the participants and raise them. Thank you very much for all of your comments, especially the scientists who contribute to improve the draft. We listened and we can see some improvements already. Your feedbacks are valuable, and there may be some large text in the draft that may lead to misunderstanding. So this is a chance for us to be on the same page, and I want to respond to the appendix 1 of criteria, environmental criteria. This is where the scientists can contribute the most to us, and there are also very technical questions from for waste management, water management, and so on. So we can also contact with you for more details We only have 5 minutes for the response to the comment. The question is why? This is about wind and solar power. Why don't we apply IFC or the World Bank's criteria for the same sectors? In Vietnam, we have some core generation projects, and if we apply the same criteria, then some projects of developing countries may not qualify as they are core generating. So I am responsible for renewable energy sector. So that is my opinion. And why 5 to 7%, but not definitely 5%, according to the current regulation by the MOIT. 5 to 7% now, 2 and 5% by 2030. That is the decision number 290 for all sectors and industries. 5% is the minimum. And for some industries, it is 7%. So I cannot express the threshold with one definite number. That is for some energy efficiency projects. Project 67. To say 5% to 7% of energy before efficiency projects in 2020 to 2030. So there are many details of regulation in this framework by MOIT. So we cannot choose a definite number, but we need to refer to this regulation as a range. And for renewable and environmental projects, there is a point F for industrial sector. Few banks suggested that we remove this part, but point F for the manufacturing of electrical tools and devices, and also other industry to support industrial sectors. Is not lack of content. We just attribute them, we put them in another section. Going back to the University of Technology, EIA, yes, that is one of the criteria that the project does not harm the environment, it should contribute to the environment. But yes, there are other criteria that in the selection of projects as well. Thank you, Dr. Phùng Chí Sĩ, for your comments. We have two concepts here. One is the screening criteria, and second, threshold and indicators. These are two different terms in the draft. Please, we will pay more attention on the definitions of terminology to make it very clear what is screening criteria and what are threshold indicators. After you, Ocean Energy, these are types of projects, and in this type we have different projects. For example, how far should wind farm and ocean energy farms from the residential areas, for example, for it is able to get the green credit. That is the only purpose and focus of the draft. So we don't refer to other requirements. Yes, this can be applied for public procurement as well. But in the morning, I think we already presented that we are considering this approach as well. So thank you very much for your comment. Dr. And agriculture and energy, yes, there are some terms that are unclear. And in the morning, as we mentioned, there are some projects that may be assessed on global gap or the gap standard in order to access to green certificates. If they don't have that certificate, then they cannot acquire free credit. So this is post inspection, and we will study international experience to ensure compliance before a project can enjoy the incentives. And there will be a clear timeline for that. For the Institute of Irrigation, thank you for your comment. We don't have many figures for quantification. We know that there are different stages in water management, but in order to have the criteria aligned with international criteria and relevant to the Vietnam context, I think we need to be quite general, and the project 3536 for environmental friendly material and energy efficiency and green infrastructure. Irrigation is part of the green infrastructure project, so you may find more details in that section. Dr. Hong can also add into my response.
Thank you. I just want to mention quickly about the industrial code and the different economic sectors in the green project, especially Mr. Ho Kung Ha CM really seconded that opinion during the completion process. If you spot any things such as from BP Bank about the quota 3830 or the Mr. G also mentioned that we will have that more clarified in the next working session. Yeah, I would like to clarify some of the points mentioned by Mr. Phung Chi Si. Mr. Phung Chi Si opinion related to the appendix about waste management. Mr. C's concern is we do not mention the projects such as sludge treatment project and mud treatment from the canals regarding the waste. Why we do not have a reuse of the solid waste. According to the environmental protection law, solid waste in the form of mud, different kind of mud, sludge in the septic tank can be considered as a mud, or the mud acquired from the water factories, or the mud from the canals can be also considered as a mud after being dewatered. And as for the sludge from the septic tank, that is considered as domestic waste the mud from the canals and creek and from the water factories. We need to conduct a separate analysis. If they belong to the hazardous waste, they will be put under the category of hazardous waste, and that's already mentioned in the draft of the green taxonomy. As for the wastewater, the reusable water and wastewater, so that is included into the reuse of the waste, including both liquid and solid waste. As for the gas, when can we consider as a reuse of the gas? When just sees that the treatment of gas, mostly after gas emitted, we need to treat them in accordance with the standard before discharging into the emitting into environment. As for the the gas, we also need to make the most out of the thermal gas. So there's some regulation of the temperature. We need to look into that, and we can consider it as one of the activities in which we reuse emitted gas. So please allow us to consider more in that regard. So why we use BTM as a consideration for as a factor to consider the green project? That is an input from Mr. Hồng Anh and Mr. Quân and some others. According to the law on environment protection, green credit, green bond is supposed to be granted on the projects, green projects. And there are 4 types of the project. There's a project that results in high environmental pollution and low environmental pollution. There's some projects that are subject to EIA and compulsory to have the environmental permit, or some can be permitted but without needing to conduct EIA. Actually, in our workshop today, when you read thoroughly, we did mention these factors. Some of the basis to consider whether it is green or not green, we based on the registration profile to be considered as a green credit or green bond. We need to have the feasibility study and EIA report, and for the project in the Group 1A, we need to gather all of these documents. And for whichever project that has only EIA report, in that case, we need to refer to it. For projects, even they don't have to do, they're not supposed to do anything. Usually, a project often has the feasibility study that covers some contents related to environmental protection. They can be used as a most favorable, most convenient basis to conclude whether it is green or not green, because everything included into that EIA report. Moreover, they are the procedures that will be carried out when the project owners register project. They need to know in advance that they may utilize the source of green credit for this project or not. So this is the part about the waste management. I would like to have a few comments. As I have just mentioned, I wonder if I missed any points. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, let me supplement some answer to the comments of Mr. Luân from the Institute of water irrigation science regarding the water resource and irrigation project. Dr. Nam already just answered. I just want to add a few more points relating to the water sources development and hygiene for the rural areas. Project 26 exploit and use water effectively that also cover the contents of water resources development and environmental hygiene. That means clean and effective water supply. In this list, all the columns of the type of the project. When we go into the any specific project holders or the companies that apply for credit, green credit or for issuance of green bond, they will have more specific names. Here in the list of projects, we just generally touch upon projects in such sectors. As such, we cannot give you an exhaustive list of all the project name. When we submit a specific project with a specific name, we will compare with the criteria of each type of project in order to figure out the corresponding threshold criteria for the project. On the works for preventing and mitigating natural catastrophe in E6. When we look into the water resources, is not included into the part of water resources, but included in E6 about the prevention of natural catastrophe. The type of project number 49 of item E6, natural catastrophe prevention. We developed technical infrastructure to mitigate and control and prevention of natural catastrophe. That is fallen into the category of this type of project. And also the system of water reservoir is also in the list of the project 49. Yeah, Mr. Luan's comment about the water reservoir also fallen into category of this type of project. Some of the comments to answer Mr. Luan's. The contents are rather technical. We acknowledge all of this and use as an input for completing the forthcoming draft. Group of GIZ experts, do you have any comments? If not, we have only 5 minutes left. Let me propose for the group of experts and the drafting team, probably the team leaders, I would like to kindly request Dr. Mike Pitton give a full accountability and answer, and also combining with a conclusion for all the workshop and roundtable discussion. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Thanh Hải, and the comments by experts. Before concluding, I'd like to sincerely thank to all the experts, scientists, and managers and representatives of financial credit institution for participating enthusiastically. Thank you for all the comments, and many comments are very great, and some of them are taken immediately into consideration. And throughout the process, we need to give clear accountability, and so that we can reach consensus. Many of them are still not quite clarified. Given the short time, we cannot have sufficient time to clarify everything. As for the next one relating to green taxonomy, Mr. Nam and others already explained. So let me give a general explanation. There's 3 components. One is Prime Minister's decision. Next, let me go quickly. and group them into together. First of all of our participants unanimously agree on the necessity of promulgating this decision. The second one is named decision. Two of you mentioned that. Allow me to. The title is Prime Minister decision on promulgation of the environmental criteria for the project with the green credit, green bonds. So legally speaking, that's pretty okay. And to go with that name, there should be no problem, according to involved line ministries. And the second one, Mr. C and some of the delegates also elaborate. The draft also regulating the promulgation of the criteria and verification. So that's not quite consistent. So thank you for that comment. We will adjust accordingly. The third one is the subject of application. There are 4 groups of subjects that's quite compatible to the law. However, in talking about the terms, that's rather redundant when we mention the enterprises. In enterprises, individual organizations. So in nature, enterprises is also a kind of organization. So we can remove the terms enterprise, no problem. But there's one emerging comment in Article 4, talking about the list. List is correct. Basically, we agree with that, but the terms items, some of the comments claim that is probably not right. So let me explain. Clause 1 of Article 149 and Clause 2 of the Article 150. The following projects are eligible to green credit and green bond. Actually, in nature, they are projects that meet the following environmental goals. So the provision of the green credit, not only for one project, but for activities or for one items of the one investment project, for example, for the whole steel production complex, but there's only one item of green credit for the waste treatment. Why we have to include the terms project item? So as number one, for people avoid to have to double the procedures for the administrative for all 4 items, but they can make use of every items relating to environment. The second one, that's open up, expand the scope of application, not only limited to the investment project, but also the subcategory of the investment project. And Mr. C mentioned about the project or items of project here, suggested should refer to it generally as a project. We did think about that. The reason why we do not shortly refer to that, but the items of project that belongs to that are the subject of the EIA project. If we refer to it as a project alone, that make overlapping with the terms of the big project. Some delegates mentioned that. We also did mention in the list the terms activities. So we need to review that in order to make that consistent with the wording in the Prime Minister decision draft. Regarding the interpretation of terms in Article 3, the drafting team will review in order to see what's lacking, what's need to be added. Regarding the list, there's 2 conditions. Prerequisite conditions, they must be in the list in order to be considered as a green project. Second one is the principle that not cause a significant harm to other goals of environment. For example, we have a goal of using effectively natural resources, but other environmental goals such as prevention of climate change or the waste treatment to avoid pollution or preservation of biodiversity. In the principle of international agencies, they often always refer to no significant harm to environment. So the second condition, there are 2 approaches. We may need to define what does it mean no causing significant harm to other environmental contents, and we need to have on the list listing all the elements that may cause harm to the environment. In the Article 149 and 150. However, in order to provide in details like that is very challenging, so we delegate Monre to define that. So the first option is to satisfy two conditions. Number one is in line with the environmental protection master plan in nature, that is national master plan, and the second one is provincial master plan. The second one is conform to DTM and standard of local standard of environment, if any. So we refer to other environmental procedures that they're supposed to conform to. They are not a big deal. So that is something we'd like to explain further for your information. And in relation to the Article 6, the point spotted by Mr. C is quite interesting. Maybe we need to reverse that or take further into consideration. We maybe take the liberty to remain the word verification or issuance of a green bond issued by the local authority. We combine with the competent authorities for them to conduct verification to avoid double duplicating another administrative procedures. The Article 7, many delegates mentioned about that. Some of the opinion agree and some disagree, and some you have a different solution. So let me, there's some of the comments we can acknowledge to accept that. Some we need to study further. Number one, Mr. Chen Minh-Hoang's comment from VP Bank. The subject of the this regulation and clause 10 of Article 7, the role of that, I agree immediately. We need to remove the clause 10 immediately. Second opinion, that is raised by many of you here, adding the case of when the project enter into operational phase, they have done all other environmental procedures in accordance with the Environmental Protection Law 2004. According to the direction of the Prime Minister, we closely stick to the Environmental Law Protection Law in 2020. They have provision on the transitional terms as environmental procedure that equivalent to DTM or the environmental certificates, the integral, the components, including the wastewater discharge certificate or the certificate for treatment of the hazardous waste in Article 39 of the Decree 08. This is the reason why we do not provide another provision. In principle, the subordinate legal documents cannot define the governing legal documents. So thank you for this comment. So how to express in a way to people understand that there are the equivalent legal documents. Some comments regarding the point in time as raised by Mustwi from Monres after the DTM, but they are not considered as a license. And after the environmental registration, they are not, however, they are not referred to as a license. That can be added to. Another comments of Mr. Hoang, the mutual recognition between countries. And some comments added explanation about the project in group 1, 2, 3, 4. And let me clarify further. The Law on Environment Protection 2020 introduced very new approach. We manage the environment according to the cycle, life cycle of the project and the extent to which it impacts the environment. In the Article 28 of the Environmental Protection Law provided that we divide the environmental protection project based on the three criteria. The first criteria, the size and the type of investment project, the size, the scale of, and the poisonous level of the discharge of substance. And in nature, that talk about the size of the impact, not relating to the polluted substance. That's third one is sensitive of the environment where the project's happening, for example, biodiversity and the domestic water sources and densely populated areas. So divided into 4 groups. The first one that has a risk of affecting the environment at the high risk. So we are supposed to control very tightly since the onset of the conceptual phase and until operation. The second one, the impact at the average level. Then the third one is low and non-impact. In principle, we stick closely to that in order to divide the authority to verify the green project. What belongs to ministerial verification, as must be said, not to mention about the green bond of the 2 communes. Green bonds affect many different entities. We want that the lowest areas, lowest level, the green bonds must be verified by the provincial competent authority. For green credit, lowest level who can approve that is a district level, not communal levels. There are 2 big comments talking about we should not integrate into DTM licensing procedures. Mr. Dong did mention, explain that. I would like to explain further. Integrating here doesn't mean that we create more administrative procedure, but we make use of the already done administrative procedures. That doesn't mean that DTM, that means we have to do a new administrative procedures. And that is to say about the first option, verification of the project in the green taxonomy, in accordance with the option to closely link to the competency of the state agency on the DTM on the environmental protection. The second option is throughout the working process, MOF, and the bank seem to be similarly not so supportive. Right from the beginning, we really wish that the competent authorities that manage credit and green bond issuance step in to manage right from the step. For the bank's institution, credit institution, bank headquarter of the foreign bank who has headquarter in Vietnam. If in necessary cases, it may hire experts or competent consultancy firm to do assessment. The third option, one delegate today, Dr. Ho Quang Hoa, that mentioned about promoting socialization. So we agree that the verification in order to delegate third independent bodies. But there's one concern here. The law on investment in 2020 provided that 227 different professionals and conditional profession, but there's no line talking about our activities certification of the project or the item of projects that are fallen under the list of green taxonomy. We will consult with the opinion of the Ministry of Justice, MPI, and Ministry of Science and Technology to see whether we can apply the item 188 regarding the service business to assess the suitability. There's 2 degrees, 0.7 and 1.6, later on adjusted in the degree 154. And second item 190 about the service of conducting verification and pricing according to degree 76 of 2018 provided details in that regard. So we, project team and Ministry of Science and Technology, will review to see whether it's applicable or not. When we delegate an agency to conduct a verification, whether the state will take risk, the person who verify accredited or licensed by the government to operate their service, such as we grant the operational service to the notary office. Should we take the approach similar to that we need to consider further? And many other comments and opinions. Let me reiterate just some of them. And
So in conclusion, we can say that to be able to choose this decision, there are four important contents that we mentioned in the morning, and I will not repeat them. And we have designed the survey form, survey templates for you to send your opinions. So if you have not provided us with the comments, then please do so. We are going to continue the process until the end of the year, and we are going to need to publish the draft on the National Information Portal, and we are going to have a big workshop in the northern area in Hanoi. So I call for your participation online or offline, and also to continue to support the drafting team and experts group. Thank you very much. I would like to send to you the appreciation on behalf of Monterey, Espore, and the drafting team and the expert group. Thank you very much, and I wish you good health and success, and the best of luck.